Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Samina Bano, Assistant Professor, Department of Psychology, Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. The name of the module is Theoretical Perspective of Youth Crime. There are different theoretical approaches for explaining the reason for which the youth engages in various crimes. The learning outcomes are having an understanding of the main biology-based theoretical explanation for youth crime and deviance, understanding psychological explanation of development of delinquent behavior, understand theories from perspectives of psychodynamic, behavioral, cognitive, information processing and personality. Understanding sociological explanation of delinquent behavior. Now, we will see one by one about these theories. We will start with biological theories. The biological theories include the Y-exhibit of neurological, physiological or hormonal influences which impacts on delinquent actions conferred by youth. Advances in the neurosciences have uncovered that biological factor along with the social condition may have some noteworthy impacts on childhood development. Genetics. At the point when both heredity and environmental factors are at work, they represent a more noteworthy number of delinquent practices than both of these two elements acting alone. Genetic environment correlation also explain youth behavior. Study by Geet et al. 1996 demonstrated that the adoptive kids had high incidence of antisocial behavior and engaged in abusive drugs when their biological parents had antisocial personality. This builds up link of heredity, transmission of adolescence, delinquent conduct, so that plays an important role. The behavior at that point thus evoke negative child rearing behavior in the new parents. G's study gives evidence of an evocative quality in heredity and environment relationship and proposes that the relationship between negative child rearing practices in the new parent and delinquent conduct in the youth is interceded by hereditary procedure. Next is psychophysiology. One persuasive psychophysiological hypothesis of delinquent conduct in youth is that they are constantly under aroused. There is high prevalence of EEG abnormality in the more frontal lobe of the cerebellum zone that manage executive functions, for example, decision making and planning. Likewise, a low resting heart rate is another characteristic of delinquent conduct in adolescence and childhood. Next is fearlessness theory. It indicates that low levels of arousal are makers of low level of fear. A fearlessness interpretation of low arousal levels assumes that subjects are not actually at rest, but that instead the rest periods of psychophysiological testing represent a mildly stressful paradigm, and that low arousal during this period indicates lack of anxiety and fear. Lack of fear would predispose to antisocial and violent behavior because such behavior, for example, fights or assaults, require a degree of fearlessness to execute, while lack of fear, especially in childhood, would help explain poor socialization, since low fear of punishment would reduce the effectiveness of conditioning. Next theory is stimulation seeking theory. This theory argues that low arousal represents an unpleasant physiological state and therefore antisocial seek stimulation in order to increase their arousal levels back to an optimal or normal level. Burglary, assault or robbery and as examples of antisocial behavior is thus viewed as a form of stimulation seeking act. This all was found by Ryan in 2002. Delinquent youth may have structural and functional deficits of the frontal lobe and the temporal lobe. So, Derstrom et al. They found about this in 2000. Reduced prefrontal operation can result in the difficulty of this path to control deeper and more primitive structures such as the amygdala, which are important area related to emotion such as rage, which leads to aggressive feelings. Prefrontal damage has also links to risk-taking irresponsibility, rule-breaking, emotional and aggressive outbursts, and argumentative behavior that can also predispose to violent outlaw acts. Loss of self-control, lack of tact, inability to modify and inhibit behavior appropriately, and poor judgment could predispose to violence as well. Next is birth complication that also plays a major role. Neuroscience studies have shown that babies with birth complication are more likely to develop delinquency and impulsive behavior and violence when they grow into adults. Birth complications such as anoxia, getting too little oxygen, forceps delivery, etc. are thought to contribute to brain damage, and this damage in turn may predispose to antisocial and criminal behavior. Next is nutrition. Although delinquency in nutrition, its deficiency in nutrition itself has been really studied in relative to childhood addiction. Several studies have demonstrated. Some studies have shown connection between overaggressiveness behavior and vitamin and mineral deficiency. Breke 1997 found this. Next is neurotoxicity. It has long been suspected that exposure to pollutants, particularly heavy metals that have neurotoxic effects, can lead to mild degrees of brain impairment, which in turn predisposes to antisocial and aggressive behavior. Again, this is found by Ryan in 2002. Hormones also plays an important role. A number of studies in a wide variety of contexts have now shown that there is indeed a link between low resting cortisol and antisocial aggressive behavior. Increased impulsivity has been associated with lower serotonin, and there is some evidence that aggressive individuals who are impulsive have particularly lower serotonin. This was found by Linoilla 1992. The next is psychological theories. There are several theories under this. First, it is psychodynamic theory, a very important theory. Psychodynamic theory holds that youth crime can result from internal conflict stemming from years of abuse and mistreatment, which leads to the experience of resentment, fear and hatred. On the off chance that this conflict can't be accommodated, the youngsters may relapse to a state in which they progress toward becoming it dominated. In the psychodynamic approach, family is considered to play an important part in developing the psyche of the adolescent. Antisocial youths frequently come from families in which parents are unable to provide appropriate control and direction that allow children to develop the personal tools they need to interact with the people. If neglectful parents fail to develop a child's superego adequately, the child's id may become the predominant personality force, and lack of superego development results in an inability be considerate about others' needs and differentiate about right and wrong. Meena, 2006. The superego helps to develop what is right, what is wrong. That is important. These children who feel unloved believe that they have inadequacy, hence they deserve penalization. Later, the youth may demand their needs to be fulfilled immediately. They may also lack compassion and sensitivity for the needs of others, act aggressively and impulsively, and demonstrate other symptoms. Next, we are coming to the behavioral theory, that a person's personality is learned throughout his life by interaction with others is the basic premise of behavior therapy. Behaviorist John B. Watson, B.F. Skinner suggests that people are social beings and we learn by observing how people react to our behavior. So, behavior is triggered initially by a stimulus or change in the environment. If a particular behavior is reinforced by some positive reaction or event, that behavior will be continued and eventually learned. However, behaviors that are not reinforced or are punished will be extinguished or become extinct. So, a delinquent behavior which had resulted in some reinforcement will be continued by the youth. Next is cognitive theory. Psychologists with a cognitive perspective focus on mental processes. Cognitive is a mental process. The way people perceive and mentally represent the world around them and how they solve problems. The processes that goes into how people morally represent and make inferences about the world is held with great importance in the criminology field. As a child grows older, his reasoning process develops in an orderly way from birth to around 12 years of age and older. This theory by Jean Piaget can be analyzed in 3 stages. Sensory motor, where children respond to the situation in an unassuming manner, seeking interesting objects and developing reflexes. Lawrence Kohlberg applied the concept of developmental stages to issue in criminology. He suggested that people go through stages of moral development during which the basis for moral and ethical decision making changes. It is conceived that individuals who engage in delinquent behavior have an ethical understanding that contrasts from that of people who abides by the law. Kohlberg grouped individuals as per the phase on the continuum at which their moral advancement has stopped to develop. Moral development theory proposes that individuals who comply with the law just to keep away from the discipline or who have viewpoints considering only his self-interest will probably perpetrate wrongdoing than the individual who see the law as something that advantages all of society and who respect the privilege of others. Again, it has been found by Meena, 2016. Information processing. Cognitive theorists who study information processing try to explain antisocial behavior in terms of perception and analysis of data. As per this approach, young people who experiences issues in handling information appropriately, not an efficient to make well thought out judgment, and who can't settle on contemplate choices when confronting emotional events are susceptible to antisocial behavior choices. Children who get aggressive very easily may have learned improper scripts by observing how others react to events. Their own parents' aggressive and inappropriate behavior would have considerable impact on them. Some children may have had early and prolonged exposure to violence. such as child abuse, which increases their sensitivity to teasing and maltreatment. They see delinquency as a fitting to the situation and use it in order to fulfill their individual needs, which take importance over social needs. For example, dutifulness to the law. When they attack victims, they misread the situation and may believe they are defending themselves. They are also likely to exhibit other social problems such as drugs and alcohol abuse. There is also evidence that delinquent boys who engage in theft are more likely to exhibit cognitive deficits than non-delinquent youths. Again, it has been found by Meena, 2016. Now, personality. Examination of the relationship between personality and crime have often yielded inconsistent results. There were found direct links between personality, traits of hostility, impulsivity and narcissism, and delinquent and criminal behavior. Hans Eysenck identified neuroticism is associated with self-destructive behavior, that is, abusive drugs and alcohol and committing crimes. Lack of enduring relationship, impulsivity, risk-taking, egocentricity, manipulativeness, forcefulness and cold-heartedness and shallow emotions. This was found by Jacobi in 2004. The origin may include traumatic socialization, neurological disorder and brain abnormality. This was found by Siegel in 2008. Now, sociological theories. We will discuss one by one. First, it is control theory. According to control theory, while some juveniles delve into delinquency, others do not. The theory is concerned with its causal factor. People may have predisposition to commit delinquent acts, and this theory concerns itself with how individuals learn not to commit crime. The control theory believes that the major mediator of the learning not to engage in crime is the social bond. Social bonds grow both from direct social controls and from internal controls, resulting primarily from affection, identification with one's parents. Social bond is seen while associating and forming connection to others individuals, sharing responsibility about work related to society as a whole and belief in a common value system. According to Hershey, 1969, the main building blocks of social bond theory are four, which includes attachment, belief, commitment and involvement. Attachment involves connectedness of adolescents to important elements of a society's social institution. It can include the family, school, church, religious places, friends and significant others. It was found in 2008. Aborchi suggests that in order representing a good image of the family or institution they belong to, the adolescent may behave in accordance to the society norms and not engage in delinquent activities. The belief aspect of the theory involves adolescents' acceptance of the moral code of ethics of the society, which held important for reducing delinquency. It helps to go in a right direction. The commitment aspect of the theory suggests that when adolescents devote much of their time, energy and resources in pursuing an ambition or a goal that will keep them focused in life, devoid of delinquency and into productive work. The involvement component proposes that in order to keep adolescents out of delinquency, they are encouraged to participate in conventional activities which the society has to offer. This will keep them busy and occupied, and delinquency will be out of their option. Hershey continued that the four essential elements which make up the social bond theory are positively interrelated, indicating that if an adolescent has a strong attachment to the family and school, such a person will be motivated to learn hard in the classroom and come out with good results. In due course, he or she will be active in the extracurricular activities of the school and put up a belief that such a way of life are important for his or her well-being. Hershey collaborated with Gottfredson to provide an alternative explanation for delinquency. Gottfredson and Hershey, 1990, proposed the general theory of crime, which suggests a link between social control and self-control, under the assumption that supervision by parents not only prevents delinquent behaviors but also trains children to turn away from the temptation for criminal conduct on their own. In order to control the deviant behavior and teach child about self-control, parents need to instigate proper monitoring, acknowledge children's deviant behavior, and utilize adequate rewards and punishment. Now, social learning theory. It's Bandura, 1977. Explained the social learning theory, which put emphasis on the reciprocal interaction between cognitive, behavioral and environmental determinants of human behavior. Social learning theory is used to study of crime and criminology by Ronald L. Eckers in 1973. Eckers was of the opinion that for conforming and deviant behavior, the same learning process is involved in a context of social structure, relationship and situation, and difference lies in the direction of the balance of influences on the behavior, which produces both. Ronald L. Eckers in 1998, who was the leading proponent of social learning theory, gave four fundamental premises which relate to the social learning theory, that include differential association, definition, differential reinforcement and imitation. The following section will examine these premises as they relate to the more general differential association we will discuss now. Differential association theory can be understood as comprising two important dimensions. These involve direct and indirect association and dealings with others who engage in certain behavior directly, or they can involve distant reference group. Inside this social setting, people are presented to changing definitions of acceptable and unacceptable behaviors, as well as a variety of behavior models that may differentially reinforce delinquent and non-delinquent behavior. These models may likewise fill in as models for the mimicking code of conduct. The earlier the association is made, the longer the duration of the association, the more frequently the association occurs, and the closer the association is, the greater the effect will be on a person's behavior. From a social learning point of view, at that point, affiliations made right off the start with family would assume an essential part in forming one's conduct, a behavior conduct, how a person behaves. Definition about it, the primary thought behind the idea of definition is that an individual will take part in more of a behavior or conduct if there are greater the number of definition favorable to deviant or criminal behavior. While some values would point towards conforming to a certain value, others could be to justify some non-conforming behavior. Now we will discuss the differential reinforcement. Now, differential reinforcement can be comprehended as a process where a person differentiates between their action on the basis of whether they will be rewarded or punished if they engage in that behavior, regardless of whether people will avoid or carry out a wrongdoing at any given time, and whether they will proceed or halt from doing it later on, relies upon the past display and foreseen future prizes and disciplines for their activities. If people are rewarded for a delinquent behavior, the probability of it being repeated will increase. Or if some negative consequences is being removed, which acts like a negative reinforcement, it may increase the likelihood of those actions, of desired action. Next is imitation. Individuals tend to act in ways that they have already seen others behaving, the way others are behaving. Seeing the activities of others, specifically individuals that are close to, can influence people in engaging in delinquent or non-delinquent behaviors. Donnerstein and Linz found in 1995. The degree to which practices are limited is influenced substantially by the attributes of the model, the action watched, and the consequences of those actions play an important role. Eckers redeveloped the theory in a way to incorporate the social structure. In his reformulation, he placed the social structure to be vital to understanding of social learning theory. He contended that in order to understand criminal and delinquent behavior, understanding the people's condition was critical, and that's very important. Now, labeling theory. Labeling theory, which follows a sociological approach, focuses on the role of social labeling in the development of crime and deviance. Shoemaker, 2005. One of the basic assumptions of labeling theory is that initial acts of delinquency are caused by a wide variety of factors. One of the primary factors in the repetition of delinquency is the fact of having been formally labeled as a delinquent. Repeated acts of delinquency are influenced by formal labels because such labels eventually alter a person's self-image, and the person begins to identify himself as a delinquent and acts accordingly. Other factors such as offenders' age, sex, race, and social class is also taken into consideration in understanding delinquent behavior as a result of labeling. Tenenbaum in 1938. Merton in 1968 suggests in lines of the labeling theory the notion of self-fulfilling prophecy. It entails a behavioral confirmation on the part of people who have been labeled as delinquents by the society. It has been found by a few of the researchers also. That is, since the society has labeled certain members as delinquent, such people over time tend to put up behaviors that confirms the predicted manifestation of who a delinquent is. Now, the subcultural theory. The subcultural or cultural theory holds that delinquent behavior grows from conformity to the prevailing social norms experienced by youth in their particular subculture. Some of these which have been the most influential are differential association theory. Sutherland in 1937 proposed the differential association theory, that delinquent behavior, according to this view, is learned behavior, similar in concept to social learning theory. Most delinquent acts are committed by youths in the company of others. It has been found by the Farrington et al. In 1975. Behavior is learned through interaction with significant others, typically parents and peers and teenagers going to a school or living in an area with high crime rates are more probable to learn those way of conduct than comparable adolescents going to school or living in territories with low rates of misconduct. This was found by Rutter and Giller in 1983. Youngsters end up engaging in delinquent behavior when they believe that the advantages they will get from engaging in the offense will be greater than when they go without it. However, the theory does not specify the nature of this learning process to delinquency. Differential oppression theory, Rigoli and Hewitt in 2006 proposed the differential oppression theory, which states that children are suppressed by their parents or caregiver who make the home life for their own conveniences and uninhabitable to them. Maltreatments compel children to put up an adaptive reaction which tend to be problem behaviors such as substance use, delinquency and the likes. Now we will discuss the strain theory. Emil Durkheim, one of the founding fathers of sociology, gave the concept of anomie. It refers to the breakdown of social norms that often comes along with rapid social change. American sociologist Robert Merton in 1957 drew on this idea to explain criminality and deviance when the goals of a society, for example, material wealth, status, that means to achieve and these etc., education, employment are not in alignment, crime can suffice. This strain among means and goals bring about dissatisfaction and resentment, and a few people are attracted to utilize illicit means to secure benefit. Cohen's in 1955 reactance theory in the line of the theory shows a link between delinquent behavior among low-income youth, but yet such a relationship between social classes and misconduct in conflicting situations. Furthermore, though their economic status often remains unchanged, many low-income delinquent youths eventually become law-abiding adults. Strain theory gives minimal explanation for delinquent acts committed by middle-class youths. Johnson, 1979, tried to find out and said this. Agnew in 1992 delivered a more elaborated description by proposing general strain theory. Strain hypothesis essentially concentrates on the presence of negative relationship with others causing negative emotions such as fear and anger, which eventually can lead to crime. Playing the key role in general strain theory, anger is located between strain and delinquencies. There are different ways of adapting to strain, and anger does not always bring about crime. There are three types of adaptation: cognitive, emotional and behavioral. In the process of selecting coping strategies, constraint and dispositions play important role. While the former denotes the internal and external conditions such as social, cultural social support, self-efficacy and environment, the later denotes adolescent's nature such as temperament, learning history and beliefs. Among constraints, social environment also play a key role in various forms. So these we have discussed about the theories. Briefly, in the conclusion, we can summarize that biological theory of youth crime shows evidence of hereditary transmission linked to adolescent delinquent conduct. Association was found between delinquent conduct in the biological parent and the child rearing practice of the new parents. Psychodynamic theory holds that abuse and mistreatment in childhood can lead to experience of resentment, fear and hatred. Behavioral theory suggests that people learn by observing how people react to our behavior. A delinquent behavior which had resulted in some reinforcement will be continued by the youth. Cognitive theory suggests individuals who consider only his self-interest will probably engage in wrongdoing than the individual who see the law as something that advantages all of society, believes in the rights of others. Information processing theory suggests that children who get aggressive very easily may have learned improper script by observing their own parents' reaction to events. Studies done on personality shows correlation of traits of hostility, impulsivity and narcissism and delinquent and criminal behavior. Subcultural or cultural theory holds that delinquent behavior grows from conformity to prevailing the social norms experienced by youth in their particular subculture. Thank you.